Inside the sleek black Bentley, Ethan was losing himself under Vivian's kiss, breathless, flushed, and already stripped bare. She, by contrast, remained fully clothed, pristine. The imbalance between them, both physical and emotional, made his face burn even hotter. Vivian curled an arm around his back, pulling him in with a low chuckle. Her lips brushed his ear. "The privacy screen's up," she whispered. "The driver can't hear. Wouldn't dare, even if he could. So what are you blushing for, This woman, cold, composed, always so untouchable, was now moving against him with a fire that stunned him. He wrapped his arms around her, drunk on her body and the way she finally seemed his. The rush was mounting fast, waves of pleasure rising like a tide, building toward an inevitable peak. Until a sharp ringtone sliced through the heat. Vivian frowned at the interruption, clearly irritated. But when she glanced at the caller ID, she answered. Ethan, still catching his breath, glanced down at the screen. The name flashing there was Nora, Vivian's closest friend, practically family. "Vivian, are you insane?" She cut her off instantly, switching to crisp, fluent Italian. "Not a good time. Speak in Italian." A sharp inhale on the other end. Then a pause. Then, finally, in a tense, low voice. "You're really marrying Julian? Are you out of your mind? After everything he did to you? You went blind saving that man, and when you hit rock bottom, he left you. For another woman. And now you're crawling back to him?" The words, though foreign, translated themselves instantly in Ethan's mind. Italian or not, the meaning hit like ice water. And the deeper it sank in, the colder he felt. Like the air had been sucked out of the car. Like he'd stepped straight into a blizzard. Vivian, meanwhile, showed no sign she noticed his reaction. "If I don't marry him," she said calmly, "the Hart family will force him to marry some wealthy hag. I can't let them do that to him." Nora's voice sharpened with fury. "And what about Ethan? He was there when you were blind, Vivian. He stood by you for years. Loved you so much he practically bled for you. We all saw it, we all know it." Vivian's tone didn't soften. "He'll never find out. I'll make sure of it." "Forever?" Nora snapped. "You think you can hide this forever? Ethan's been wanting to marry you, doesn't he deserve the truth?" Vivian's chest tightened. The more she heard, the more irritated she became. Her voice turned clipped. "Just keep this quiet. Don't tell anyone. In a few weeks, I'll stage a fake wedding for Ethan. He'll believe it." And with that, she hung up. No goodbye. No second thought. Just silence. Vivian glanced down, let the phone slip from her hand, and resumed moving on top of Ethan. He trembled beneath her. Not from pleasure anymore, but from something colder, something breaking. After it was over, he shakily began putting his clothes back on. Just as he opened his mouth, still breathless, to speak. Her phone buzzed again. Vivian picked it up, gave the screen a quick look, then rapped the divider. "Pull over." She turned to Ethan, her tone as calm as ever. "Something urgent came up at the office. I need you to get out here and take a cab home, all right?" Ethan didn't say a word. He just nodded. The car door opened with a soft click, and the moment his feet touched the pavement, the black Bentley peeled off like a streak of lightning, swallowed by the city. He stood there on the curb, cars streaming past, the skyline bleeding into blur. And then, he broke. Tears flooded his eyes, hot and helpless. No one knew he'd spent the last 2 years secretly learning Italian. He never told a soul. Not even Vivian. He wanted to close the distance between them, to reach her world. To understand her, in every language. So when Nora spoke, every word, every sentence, he understood all of it. And now those words echoed in his skull, sharp as broken glass, slicing through his chest. Each syllable a wound. Each sentence a betrayal. And with that, the memories came rushing in. Uninvited. Unstoppable. Vivian Archer, the girl who once seemed like a goddess, untouchable, impossibly out of reach. And Ethan, the housekeeper's son. He still remembered the first time he saw her. He'd followed his mother through the grand archway of the Archer estate, a boy lost in the glint of marble and chandeliers. And there she was, Vivian, sitting in the sunroom, playing the piano, her fingers dancing over the keys with elegant precision. He had never heard music like that. He had never seen anyone like her. From that moment on, the name Vivian wasn't just a name. It was something etched deep inside him, permanent and sacred. He never told anyone. Not just because of the chasm between them, the kind of gulf that people like him weren't supposed to cross. But because Vivian's heart already belonged to someone else. Julian. The golden boy. The childhood friend. The one she never tried to hide her feelings for. She protected Julian like a treasure. Cherished him out loud. And when she was 17, she threw herself in front of a car for him. Vivian lost her sight that day. And Julian? He disappeared. Vanished from the Archer estate. Vanished from her life. Worse, he moved on. Found someone new. Never looked back. Her parents, Edward and Margaret, were too wrapped up in business and boardrooms to care for a blind daughter. So they sent her away, tucked her into the shadows of the family's countryside estate like a forgotten heirloom. And Ethan? He asked to be transferred. He chose to live there. To serve her. To stay. For 7 years, he was her eyes, her hands, her quiet guardian. And then, when she was 23, her vision returned. The dust cleared from the diamond, and Vivian Archer shined again. In a single year, she rebuilt herself. And rose. The prodigal heiress. The crown jewel of the Archer family. Back on top. He was the one who stayed through every season. He was the one beside her from midnight till dawn. He held her through the darkest years, when the world forgot her. He was the one she kissed, the one who held her in the quiet hours, the one who shared her bed. All of it. It was him. And yet the first thing she did after reclaiming her power, after rising from the ashes and stepping back into the world, was marry the man who abandoned her. Julian. Ethan had spent years trying to keep up with her, pushing himself beyond his limits just to be worthy. But no matter how hard he worked, how much he changed, her parents never stopped seeing him for what he was, the help. The housekeeper's son. Time and again, they tried to buy him off. And time and again, Vivian fought them. She defended him. She chose him. And because of that, because he never wanted to be the reason she had to fight her family, he never once considered leaving. Until today. Today, something broke. Today, he was done. Ethan wiped his face with the back of his hand. Pulled out his phone. And dialed. Margaret, he said, his voice steady. I'm ready to accept the $50 million. I'll leave Vivian. For good. There was a beat of silence on the other end, then an explosion of relief. You've finally come to your senses? Margaret exclaimed. Good. That's good. You were never a match for Vivian, you're a servant's child. Where are you now? Come sign the agreement. Moments later, an address lit up his screen. Ethan let out a soft, bitter laugh. Then he hailed a cab. The cafe was quiet. Too polished to be cozy, too sterile to feel real. Margaret was already there, waiting with a folder beside her espresso. She didn't waste time. She grilled him, about everything. He answered each question clearly, calmly. Not because he wanted to, but because he wanted it done. When she was satisfied, she opened the folder and slid the contract across the table. "Once you sign," she said, "I'll wire half the amount to your account. The rest will be transferred after you leave. But you need to promise me, swear to me, you'll never show your face to Vivian again. Not now, not ever. Understood?" Ethan looked down at the figure, $50 million. It didn't make him hesitate. Not for a second. Because he wasn't planning to come back. Not in this life. Not in the next. Without a word, he took the pen and signed. Margaret finally exhaled, the tension melting off her shoulders. She gathered the papers, stood, and gave him one last instruction. "You have 2 weeks," she said. "Disappear. Change your name. Leave the country if you want. I don't care. Just make sure Vivian never finds you." Ethan nodded. "I understand. You have nothing to worry about." And with that, she walked away, satisfied. Ethan sat there a moment longer, staring at the door she disappeared through. Then he stood. And went home. Making sure Vivian never saw him again? That part was easy. After all, the Archers were practically born into the defense and intelligence world. From her grandfather to her father, and even Ethan himself. What Vivian didn't know was that Ethan, too, had once served the system. And because of the top-secret project he was involved in, he'd signed an airtight government non-disclosure agreement that barred him from ever leaving the U.S. But there was a loophole. If he surrendered his American citizenship and immigrated, say, to Australia, then he'd fall outside the system's jurisdiction. It would be final. Untraceable. And Vivian would never be able to find him again. Not in this lifetime. He stayed up all night reading immigration documents. Legal loopholes. Fast-track processing. Conditions of renunciation. By dawn, his decision was made. Just as he picked up his phone to check the time, a notification lit up his screen, Instagram. He tapped it open. It was a 9-photo carousel. From Julian. The top row, 3 mirror selfies, Julian grinning like an idiot with a bouquet of red roses. Middle row, close-up shots of their marriage certificate, front and center. Bottom row, their hands, fingers interlaced, Vivian's slender ones tucked between his. Ethan froze. He knew Vivian had wanted to keep the wedding secret. She'd said it herself. She was going to stage a fake wedding for Ethan, for God's sake. But Julian had posted it anyway. Worse, he'd set the post to visible to Ethan only. A digital middle finger. Ethan didn't flinch. He tapped the little heart icon, giving it a like. Seconds later, his phone buzzed again. A message from Vivian. "Ethan, I'll be on a work trip for the next few days. Won't be home." He replied with a simple, "Okay." Then he set his phone down, walked into the bathroom, and started brushing his teeth. The next morning, Ethan woke early and headed straight to the immigration office. He paid for the expedited service. They told him it could be processed within 2 weeks. Only then did his lungs finally loosen. In the back seat of his Uber, he absent-mindedly opened Instagram. Julian had posted again. This time, Vivian was in the frame, half her body, visible from the side, unmistakable. The two of them were touring houses together. Laughing. Holding hands. They'd settled on a modern villa at Harbor Point Estates. Ethan liked the post. Then locked his phone. On the 3rd day, he handed in his resignation. Box in arms, he left the office for the last time and headed home. That evening, Julian posted again. A close-up, his tuxedo jacket, polished cufflinks, and a glittering engagement ring on his left hand. That diamond on his ring finger practically screamed triumph. Ethan liked it again. Then collapsed into bed and pulled the blanket over his head. Day 4. Another update. A pristine wedding photo framed on the wall, Vivian in white, Julian at her side. It was hanging in what looked like the foyer of their new home. Ethan stared at it for a long time. Too long. Then he gave it the same ritualized response, a single tap. Like. That night, he went out with a few old friends. Dinner. Laughter. Long hugs. No explanations. Just a quiet, heavy goodbye. When he returned, it was dark. He carried several boxes into his apartment. And started clearing out every trace of her. The gifts. The matching toothbrushes and mugs. Photos. Notes. Jewelry. Tokens. Everything she had ever given him. One by one, he dropped them into the trash. Not one thing remained. By the time he was done, it was well past midnight. Ethan was just about to switch off the lights when the front door opened. Vivian walked in. She stopped cold the moment she stepped inside, her brows pulling tight. Why does the place look so empty? Didn't like the clutter, Ethan replied, not missing a beat. Figured I'd toss some stuff. We'll get new things later. Vivian nodded slowly. She peeled off her coat and let it fall onto the couch, but her eyes caught on something near the hallway. Cardboard boxes. Half-sealed. Neat. Intentional. Her voice sharpened. You quit your job? Ethan calmly continued packing his bag. Yeah. Needed a change. He kept his tone even, almost casual. And his hands didn't shake. Vivian, satisfied by his composed answers, didn't press further. She slipped into his arms and nestled close, her voice soft now. I've been so swamped lately. Barely had time for you. But your birthday's coming up. How about tomorrow we go to that auction house downtown? You pick whatever you like. Ethan didn't say no. The next evening, they arrived at the auction hall, coats draped over their arms, seats in the front row. And then Ethan saw him. Julian. Strutting through the room like he owned the place, he plopped down in the empty seat next to Vivian, like it was his right. Vivian didn't even glance at him. The entire night, she kept her head turned toward Ethan, her body tilted his way, her voice low and sweet in his ear. Julian, for all his theatrics, might as well have been invisible. When the auction ended, she didn't linger. She grabbed Ethan's hand and headed straight for the exit. On their way out, Ethan ducked into the restroom. When he returned, he heard the noise first, snickers, jeers, the kind of laughter that always meant something ugly. He followed the sound toward the stairwell and found Julian backed into a corner, surrounded by a group of well-dressed women dripping venom. Well, look who it is, one of them sneered. Julian, the guy who dumped blind Vivian and crawled back after she got her sight, and her money, back. Another cackled. Didn't your daddy try to marry you off to some 50-year-old cougar? Honestly, you've still got that pretty face. We'd take good care of you. The last part never made it out of her mouth. Vivian had arrived. Storming down the stairs like a bullet. Without a word, she kicked the closest woman square in the stomach. The others shrieked and stumbled back. Then she lunged for the ringleader and shoved her down, pinning her to the floor. Her voice was ice and fire all at once. You think you can humiliate him and walk away? We're sorry. Please, we didn't mean it, the women cried, scrambling to apologize, voices shaking. We didn't know. Vivian's eyes were blazing. Get out. And if I ever catch you near him again, pray I don't. The women fled, heels clacking in panic. The crowd that had gathered along the stairs stayed frozen, caught between fascination and fear. Vivian didn't even look at them. She dropped to one knee beside Julian and took his arm gently. Are you hurt? Julian collapsed into her, eyes brimming. My ankle. I think I twisted it. It hurt so much. Vivian nodded, jaw tight. She slipped her arm around his back and began guiding him out of the building. In her rush to protect him, she elbowed past the onlookers, and in doing so, accidentally shoved Ethan aside. He fell hard. The back of his head struck the stone step with a sickening crack. Gasps echoed down the stairwell. "Shit, he's bleeding. Somebody get help." Ethan clenched his teeth against the pane, face twisted, sweat blooming across his skin. He looked up, just in time to see Vivian vanishing into the crowd with Julian in her arms. She never looked back. Not even once. Ethan went to the hospital alone. The gash on his head needed stitches. It was late, nearly 2 a.m., by the time he made it home. He didn't sleep. He couldn't sleep. Every turn in bed sent pain rippling through his skull. But that wasn't what kept him awake. Vivian didn't come home that night. Not even to check if he was okay. The next morning, Ethan forced himself out of bed, aching and groggy, and headed to the clinic to get his bandage changed. Back home, he slumped on the couch, scrolling absently, until a new video lit up his screen. Posted by Julian. It was a short clip, grainy, maybe taken secretly. But the content was crystal clear. Vivian. Kneeling. Her head bowed, gently massaging Julian's ankle, applying ointment with careful, delicate hands. The video looped, over and over. Ethan watched it more times than he could count. His eyes burned, red-rimmed, but he couldn't look away. Not until sleep finally dragged him under like a tide. When he woke again, the sky outside was already black. His phone buzzed violently against the pillow. Dozens of missed messages. And one call. He picked it up groggily. Vivian's voice came through, steady and low. She read off an address. "Come here. Now." There was no explanation. Just a command. Ethan hesitated, but only for a moment. Then he swung his legs off the bed, washed his face, and got dressed. The private room was dimly lit when he arrived. As the door swung open, the first person he saw was Julian. Red-eyed, lips trembling, curled into himself like some pitiful little rabbit, pathetic and pristine, all at once. Vivian sat beside him, gaze fixed on Ethan, her expression unreadable but heavy with judgment. The silence in the room was thick. Almost theatrical. Finally, Ethan broke it. "What did you want to see me for?" Vivian sat straighter, her fingers laced together in that poised, calculated way she always did when she was preparing to deliver a verdict. "Those women from yesterday," she said flatly. "The ones who ambushed Julian at the auction. Was that you?" Ethan blinked. His body froze in place, but his eyes shifted, instinctively, to Julian. And there it was. The tiniest flicker. A glint of triumph in Julian's gaze. Quick as a spark, gone in an instant. But Ethan saw it. And he understood. The whole damn thing had been staged. He let out a low, dry laugh. Not from amusement, but exhaustion. "No. It wasn't me. I don't know those women. I wouldn't waste my time doing something like that." Vivian's expression didn't soften. She lowered her gaze. Her tone stayed calm, almost too calm. "Ethan, when Julian left me back then, I let him go. I didn't chase him, didn't hold on to hate. And you've been with me for 7 years. You should know who I care about now." She paused, her voice cooling further. "The Hart family might be a mess now. Everyone's kicking them while they're down. But that doesn't mean you should. I won't let the person I love be part of that." The words hit Ethan like a slap. 7 years. 7 years of being at her side. Of loving her through blindness and betrayal, of sacrificing everything without ever asking for anything back. And now she was standing here, accusing him of cruelty. His throat tightened. His voice cracked. 7 years, he echoed softly. Funny, and I'm still not sure who you really love. Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly. What's that supposed to mean? He gave her a small, bitter smile. It means, he said quietly, that I'm just the housekeeper's son. What power, what leverage could I possibly have to orchestrate something like that? You really think I could call in a hit squad to harass your fiancé in public? He wasn't yelling. He wasn't begging. Just laying it out. Raw. Honest. Bare. But even then, even with every card turned face up, Vivian's eyes remained cold. She didn't believe him. And Ethan could feel the last of his strength drain out. So he stopped trying. He inhaled sharply and let it go. Fine. What do you want me to do? Vivian rubbed her temples, weariness bleeding into her voice. Apologize, she said. A beat. You made a mistake. Just say you're sorry. Julian had been sitting quietly all this time, looking fragile and pitiful, like a wounded deer in the corner of the room. Then suddenly, he spoke. No need for an apology, he said, his voice soft, almost innocent. If you're really sorry, Ethan, then drink. That'll do. He gestured toward the table. Rows of crystal tumblers glinted under the dim lighting, each filled to the brim with amber-orange whiskey. Ethan's eyes followed the line of glasses. Then lifted to Vivian. He searched her face for something, anything. Permission. Protection. A sign that this wasn't real. But the lighting was low, shadows draped across her expression like curtains. He couldn't see her clearly. Couldn't read her. His chest tightened. The air thinned. He started breathing faster, lips parting slightly, searching for oxygen. She knows. She knew he was allergic to alcohol. He'd told her. More than once. A flash of disbelief crossed his face, but then faded. Replaced by something else. Resignation. He let out a small, broken laugh. There were tears in his eyes, but none fell. He didn't speak again. Didn't plead. He simply reached out, picked up the first glass. And drank. One shot. Then another. And another. The burn was sharp, biting, brutal, cutting its way down his throat, searing his stomach, crashing through his system like fire. But it wasn't just pain. It was protest. It was surrender. It was 7 years of silence, swallowed in glass after glass. By the 7th shot, Vivian finally snapped. Enough, she shouted, lunging forward. Stop it. But Ethan just stared at the remaining untouched glasses, over a dozen still waiting. He laughed again, bitter and breathless. That's enough, he said hoarsely. So that's it? I've apologized now, right? Earned a few points with your golden boy? Vivian shot to her feet, grabbing his wrist with force. Her face, usually so composed, so unreadable, was storm-dark and twisted in fury. You know that's not what I meant, she hissed. I told you, I'm not with Julian. Not anymore. What you did, Ethan, if the Archer family gets wind of it, they'll never let you near me again. I'm trying to protect you, damn it. Her words came fast, clipped, impassioned. And on the surface, they made sense. But Ethan laughed. Not cruelly. Not mockingly. Just, tired. He looked her dead in the eye. Right. Because the Archer family would totally approve of Julian, he said, voice cracked and low. That must be it. He took a shaky breath, the sting of the alcohol catching up to him now, his vision swimming. But you still married him. Didn't you? She flinched. Barely. And all it took, was one word from him. He didn't say anything else. Didn't scream. Didn't cry. He just pulled his arm from her grip. And walked toward the door. No drama. No theatrics. Just the sound of his footsteps echoing across the floor. But as he reached the threshold, his body suddenly faltered, then tilted. And before anyone could move, Ethan collapsed. Face first. Out cold. Ethan. Vivian's voice cracked, panic ripping through her chest. She didn't hesitate. In one swift movement, she dropped to the floor and pulled him into her arms, her heart hammering in her ears. Behind her, Julian's voice broke the moment. Vivian. I feel dizzy, he whimpered, hand clinging to her sleeve, voice tinged with desperation. Can you help me? Please. Vivian paused. Just for a second. Then she stood, scooped Ethan into her arms, and turned for the door. Her voice was sharp. Final. I'm taking Ethan to the hospital. Call your assistant. And she was gone. When Ethan opened his eyes again, he was in a hospital room. Clean sheets. Monitors beeping quietly. Sterile light spilling through the blinds. And Vivian, still in yesterday's clothes, her hair a little messy, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, was sitting by his bedside, watching him like he might vanish again. The moment she saw his eyes flutter open, her shoulders finally dropped. Relief washed across her face. Neither of them spoke. They just looked at each other for a long time, the silence between them louder than any apology. Vivian reached for the water pitcher and poured a cup with slow, careful movements. She handed it to him, tucked the blanket tighter around his waist, then stood and went to fetch the doctor. When the physician arrived, she listened attentively, asking questions, jotting down instructions, nodding along as if her life depended on understanding every word. She didn't miss a single detail. Her phone buzzed multiple times. Her secretary even appeared outside the door once, looking torn between professionalism and desperation. But every time someone reminded her she had meetings to attend, she waved them off. Ethan watched her from the bed, a quiet ache behind his ribs. You should go, he said finally, voice low. I'll be fine. I can take care of myself. You don't need to be here. Vivian turned toward him slowly, her tone soft but deliberate. I do need to be here, Ethan. Everything I'm doing, I should be doing. Have you forgotten? Her eyes held something fragile, something old. You were the one who took care of me. All those years ago. His breath caught. For a moment, the fluorescent lights blurred, and he was no longer in a hospital bed. He was 17 again, watching a girl sit motionless in the sun, eyes vacant, world dark. Vivian had been abandoned after the accident, left to rot in the countryside estate while the rest of her family played empire. But Ethan had stayed. He'd taught himself Braille just so he could help her read again. Escorted her to classes. Read aloud to her. Sat beside her under the trees. Brought her homemade snacks, guessing which textures she liked best. Turned every invisible day into light. For a while, it had felt like he'd stolen the moon. And for 7 years, his life, however small, had felt like it mattered. But moons don't belong to boys like him. And he could never go back. That afternoon, the doctor took Ethan in for a full evaluation. About 30 minutes later, a nurse wheeled him back to the room. As they opened the door, Ethan saw Vivian standing near the window, his phone pressed to her ear. Her posture was rigid, her brow furrowed. Her voice, cold and clipped, cut through the air. I've told you already, I'm with Ethan because I love him. I don't care about his background. I chose him. And nothing you say is going to change that. I will marry him. And he's not leaving me. Ethan stopped in his tracks. Vivian turned just then, catching the movement out of the corner of her eye. Their gazes locked. But then, on the other end of the line, Margaret's voice rang out loud and clear. "What do you mean, he's not leaving? Vivian, don't you know? Ethan already agreed to leave the country. Days ago." The words hung in the air like a bomb mid-fall. Silence. Then Ethan stepped forward, his limbs still unsteady, and reached for the phone. He took it from her hand in one motion and hung up. Vivian stared at him, stunned. "What was that?" she asked, confused by his sudden intensity. "What's going on?" Ethan looked at her, really looked. And the way she blinked, the way her brow furrowed in innocent confusion, it told him everything. She hadn't heard Margaret's full sentence. She didn't know. His chest loosened. "Nothing," he said, forcing a faint smile. "I just don't want you two fighting over me again. That's all." And that much was true. The Archer family had been fighting this relationship from the start, making calls, threatening business partners, digging up his past. Vivian had gone to war for him more than once. Screamed matches. Closed-door arguments. Walkouts. She exhaled, her suspicion fading. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's talk about your scan. What did the doctor say?" Ethan looked down at the crisp white sheet tucked over his legs. "Nothing serious," he murmured. "They said I'm good to go. I can be discharged today." The next few days at home were quiet. Vivian barely stepped outside. She stayed close to Ethan, shadowing his every move, trying to close a distance she couldn't name. But he wasn't the same. The warmth that used to fill the room with him, the teasing remarks, the playful glances, had faded into silence. He spent most of his time sitting alone in corners, eyes fixed somewhere far off, as if watching something only he could see. Vivian couldn't figure out what had changed. She tried to pull him into her arms one evening, gently coaxing him to talk, to smile. But he eased away. "I'm not feeling well," he said softly. "Gonna lie down." She watched him walk down the hallway to the bedroom, the door clicking shut behind him. A frown crept onto her face. She figured he was still bothered by what had happened that night, the apology, the drinks, the humiliation. So she decided to make it up to him. In her world, love was proved in gestures. So she planned one. On Ethan's birthday, Vivian threw a party. Not just a dinner. A full-scale, high-profile event. Dozens of guests came, many of them high society regulars. Bankers. Heiresses. Trust fund kids and startup sharks. The whole elite circle. They came for Vivian, not for Ethan. In her presence, they were cordial enough. They smiled. Shook hands. Complimented his suit. But the second she stepped away, their masks slipped. "You couldn't pay me to attend a housekeeper's son's birthday party," one woman sneered behind a flute of champagne. "This whole thing reeks of second-hand fabric and desperation. The smell alone could kill a person." Another chuckled into her cocktail. "Honestly, I don't get what Vivian sees in him. Look at him, zero class, zero pedigree. If it were me, I'd have thrown him a check and moved on." "I know, right?" someone else chimed in. "If she actually marries him, it'll stain the Archer name for good. The board won't even need a vote." Meanwhile, the man they were so casually dismantling stood alone by the edge of the ballroom, a glass untouched in his hand, the birthday boy in name only. He heard every word. No one whispered. No one cared to. He kept his head down. Didn't react. But inside, every word struck like stone. He felt smaller with each passing minute. If it weren't for Vivian, if it weren't for the look on her face when she planned this, he wouldn't have come at all. Every second he stayed was an act of endurance. At exactly 7 o'clock, something shifted. A sudden swell of noise rippled through the hall. People turned, one by one at first, then all at once, toward the entrance. Gasps. Murmurs. Then, as if choreographed, 100 expressions of disdain flipped into flattery. Because there, in the spotlight of the entrance, stood Vivian, with her arm looped through Julian's. The chatter flared immediately. Archer must have left earlier to pick him up. Wow, that's some kind of loyalty. I heard she nearly brawled with a woman who insulted him last week. Guess that wasn't just a rumor. Look at them. They belong together. It's like a magazine cover come to life. Honestly? He's got the face. She's got the fortune. It works. In the rising hum of admiration and speculation, Ethan stood motionless. Watching. Julian, ever the showman, wore an easy smile, tailored suit clinging to him like armor. And Vivian, poised as ever, walked beside him, head high, unreadable as always. Ethan blinked. For a split second, he felt like he was dreaming. Or watching a memory play in reverse. Like none of the last 7 years had happened. Like the girl he once taught to read Braille, had never needed him at all. Julian was dressed in high fashion, sleek, perfectly tailored, and impossibly expensive. The custom tux hugged his tall frame like it was made from light and shadow. And that face, delicately handsome, almost ethereal, carried the kind of polish only old money could buy. He looked like he belonged on the cover of an art magazine, not in the middle of someone else's birthday party. Even standing beside Vivian, with all her imposing grace and unshakable presence, Julian didn't shrink. He held his own. Ethan watched them. Quietly. And somewhere in the fog of memory, an old moment surfaced. Months ago, maybe longer, Vivian had been sketching idly by the window. He'd asked what she was drawing. Just something random, she'd replied, brushing hair from her face. I had a picture in my head. It was a faceless silhouette, tall, slender, wrapped in elegance. The details were soft, unfinished. But even then, Ethan had thought it was beautiful. Back then, he hadn't questioned it. But tonight, the truth hit him in the chest like a steel rod. That sketch hadn't been faceless. It had just never been him. Not a reconciliation. Not a second chance. Vivian had never forgotten. She just waited. Ethan lowered his gaze, turned to leave. But Julian's voice rang out behind him. Ethan. He stopped. Julian stepped forward, smiling innocently. Heard it's your birthday. Hope you don't mind me showing up uninvited. I even brought a gift. He gestured to the doorway. A handler led in a snow-white puppy, fur practically glowing under the chandeliers. His name's Jake. Isn't he adorable? The little dog trotted forward, yipping playfully, tail wagging as it bounded toward Ethan. Ethan staggered back. He collided with the drink table, knocking over a glass. His hand gripped the edge to steady himself. His face had gone pale. Eyes wide with fear. Please, he managed, voice tight. Take it away. I don't like dogs. Chapter 6. Julian's expression fell, like he'd just been slapped. He turned to Vivian, pouting slightly. He's still upset about last time, isn't he? Maybe I should go. I didn't mean to intrude. He spun on his heel to leave, but Vivian reached out instinctively, catching his wrist. Wait. Her brows furrowed as she turned toward Ethan. He was trying to be kind. I thought you loved animals. Just accept the gift, okay? Ethan's hands were clenched at his sides, knuckles white. He swallowed hard and turned his eyes away from both of them. Paige, he said quietly to her assistant, would you mind keeping the dog with you? Vivian's expression tightened. She thought he was just being cold again. Punishing Julian with silence. With a sigh, she looped her arm through Julian's and walked him into the inner hall. The crowd followed. Laughter resumed. Ethan was left alone again. The moment the doors closed, he reached for a glass of water, downed it in one gulp, and set it down with trembling fingers. His chest ached. Not from bitterness. Not even from jealousy. From memory. He had loved dogs. But 5 years ago, during a violent summer storm, everything changed. Vivian had come down with a high fever. Delirious. Burning up. The whole city was blacked out, no electricity, no signal, no one picking up the phone. So Ethan had run out into the storm, desperate to find help. As he crossed the neighborhood, a neighbor's dog, panicked by the thunder, broke free and chased him. It had latched onto his leg, tearing through skin and muscle. But Ethan didn't stop. He'd made it to a doctor, dragging his bleeding leg behind him. Vivian never knew. He'd bandaged the wound himself, told her everything was fine, and stayed by her side until the fever broke. He never said a word. Not because it didn't matter. But because he never wanted her to feel guilt. So when she looked at him tonight and asked why he wouldn't accept a puppy, he said nothing. Just like always. The room was shifting. Those who came to the party had long mastered the art of reading power. And power, tonight, radiated not from Ethan, but from the pair who walked in hand. Vivian had barely concealed her preference. And the moment her smile leaned toward Julian, so did everyone else's. Now, as the celebration reached its peak, guests crowded around Julian like he was the one being honored. The lights dimmed. The champagne tower glimmered under a golden spotlight. And Ethan? He stood off to the side, a forgotten prop in a play named after him. Eventually, Vivian, looking appeased now that the tension had cooled, turned to him and waved him over. "Ethan," she called gently. "It's time. Come blow out your candles." He walked toward the cake in silence. Slow, measured steps. He placed his hands on the table, inhaled. And just as he was about to make a wish, Julian's voice rang out behind him, far too loud, far too bright. "Oh, wow, what a coincidence." Julian beamed. "Ethan, you and Jake share a birthday. Isn't that wild? We should celebrate together." The room erupted into laughter. Muffled snickers. Covered mouths. Thinly veiled mockery. Julian's smile widened, his eyes locked on Ethan, daring him to react. Ethan's fingers curled into his palms, nails biting skin. He took a shallow breath, ice threading through his voice. "Well then," he said flatly, "why don't we let the dog blow out the candles? Everyone can sing to him instead. I wouldn't want to ruin the moment." And he turned to leave. Vivian's jaw clenched. Her voice dropped an octave. "Ethan. Don't you dare walk out. This is your birthday party." But he didn't stop. He kept walking, through the hum of confused whispers, past the half-hearted music. Vivian's patience snapped. She caught up and grabbed his wrist, whispering harshly in his ear. "Don't be stupid," she hissed. "This room is filled with people from our circle. If you storm out now, it will get back to the Archer family. And if they hear you're unstable, they'll never accept us." "Accept us? Us?" He blinked at her, the words ringing hollow. "She's already married. There is no us." Behind them, the birthday song began. Vivian pushed him gently but firmly back toward the cake. "Just get through tonight," she murmured. "Please." Ethan gave a stiff nod and returned to his place. He smiled. Or at least tried to. But his face had all the warmth of stone. He stood like a sculpture, carved out of pain and indifference, as the crowd sang around him. Then, without warning, someone scooped up the puppy and shoved it into his arms. His body recoiled instinctively. Every hair on his skin stood on end. The dog squirmed. Yelped. And in the chaos, it leapt. straight into the towering champagne pyramid. The crash was instant. Flutes shattered midair, liquid rained down like broken glass, and the entire structure came crashing toward the floor. Screams rang out. Time slowed. Ethan turned, just in time to see Vivian yank Julian into her arms and shield him with her body. The champagne tower fell. Crystal and booze and steel trays slammed into Ethan, slashing, shattering, bruising. He hit the floor hard. A moan slipped from his lips. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Somewhere in the distance, someone shouted his name. Vivian turned. Her eyes widened. For a moment, she started toward him. But then Julian screamed. Vivian! Oh my God! Jake scratched me. I think he scratched me. Do you think it's rabies? Is it rabies? He pointed to a faint line on his ankle. Barely a graze. Vivian hesitated. She looked at Ethan, curled in pain on the floor, wet with champagne and blood. Then she turned to Julian, still whining, still clutching her arm. She gave the slightest sigh. Then called to her assistant. Take Ethan to the hospital, she said briskly. And without looking back, she walked out. Julian still tucked in her arms. He sat there, drenched in broken glass and champagne, alone in the aftermath. The party banner above him loosened, the strings snapping silently. It fluttered down, landing at his feet like the last shred of ceremony. Ethan reached for it with trembling fingers. A birthday sign, cheap and colorful. Mocking, almost. He looked around the hall. Spilled drinks. Trampled confetti. Empty chairs. Everyone was gone. And now, finally, his tears came. They slid down his face, unhurried and unashamed, dripping silently onto the floor. That was how his 23rd birthday ended. Not with candles. Not with laughter. But with humiliation, pain, and a hollowed-out heart. It was almost dawn by the time he made it home. His shirt still damp. Shoulder aching. Steps heavy. He barely had time to drop his keys before his phone buzzed. A message. Julian. Since you're always liking my posts, I assume you've figured it out by now. Vivian and I are legally married. She promised me a wedding in Hawaii, said she's already picked the venue. It's everything we dreamed about when we were kids. Every little detail, and she remembered all of it. Isn't that sweet? Also, thank you. If it weren't for you, Vivian might never have gotten her sight back. Really, Ethan. Thanks for taking care of my husband for 7 whole years. Ethan stared at the screen. No anger came. No shout. No throw of the phone. Just numbness. He walked into the bedroom and lay down. And for the first time in a long time, slept without dreaming. Vivian didn't come home that night. Just a message. Ethan, I have a few things to handle. Is your shoulder bad? If it hurts too much, tell me, I'll come back right away. He read it. Again and again. Then typed out a single response. No need. And that was it. Vivian, from this day on, I no longer need you. When the wound on his shoulder had finally scabbed over, Ethan returned to the old Archer estate. The place they used to live in. Back when she couldn't see. Back when she still needed him. The garden was overgrown now. The peach tree still stood tall, heavy with leaves. He walked to its base and picked up a shovel. There, buried beneath the soil, was a small iron box. Rust had begun to eat away at the edges. Moisture clouded the glass jar inside. Years ago, on Vivian's 18th birthday, they'd each written a wish. Sealed them in jars. Buried them under this tree. He pried it open. Took out the 2 scrolls of paper. Unrolled the first, his handwriting, faded but intact. I hope Vivian can see the world again. I hope she's safe and happy. I hope I can stay by her side, always. All his wishes, every single one, had been about her. Some had come true. Some never would. He opened the second note. Vivian's. I hope I can regain my sight. I hope Julian is well. Every word was for Julian. Not a single mention of Ethan. Not even back then. It was never about forgetting Julian. She never stopped loving him. She never blamed him for leaving. She never regretted giving up her sight for him. She had always loved him. Without shame. Without apology. Without hesitation. Ethan let out a hollow laugh, eyes stinging. He tore up his own wish, piece by piece, and threw it into the drain. Then, slowly, he reached for the chain around his neck. A silver necklace. The first gift Vivian gave him after she returned to the Archer family, bought with her very first earnings. He'd been upset she'd spent so much. She'd cupped his face and kissed him like he was her whole world. Ethan, as long as you're by my side, I have the strength to conquer anything. This necklace? It's nothing. Because one day, everything I have, including me, will be yours. He stared at it for a long time. Then laid it gently in the box, along with the memories, the broken wish, and everything else he once thought was love. He buried it all beneath the peach tree. Packed the dirt. Smoothed the earth. And walked away. Home. Ethan had just reached the front gate of the old estate when he came face to face with them. Vivian and Julian. She paused mid-step, clearly surprised to see him there. Ethan? Her brows lifted slightly. What are you doing here? He didn't answer. Instead, his eyes swept past her to Julian, and his voice came quiet but pointed. I should ask you that. What are you doing here? Vivian opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Julian stepped forward with his usual smile, carefree, polished, and uninvited. It's been ages since I've heard Vivian play, he said. She told me the piano was still at the old house. We came to pick it up. You know this place best, mind showing us around? And without waiting for permission, Julian looped his arm through Ethan's and began leading the way inside. The moment the door opened, Ethan felt it all rush back. The scent of old wood. The faintest trace of her perfume still lingering on the curtains. The furniture, unchanged. Frozen in time. Everything looked exactly as it had the day they left. A time capsule of the life they'd shared. Vivian hesitated on the threshold, swept into the stillness. Something shifted in her expression. She turned to Ethan, her voice soft. Ethan, do you remember when we... I don't, he cut in, looking away. The words were barely audible. Vivian blinked, caught off guard. She pointed toward a Lego model in the corner of the room. We put that together on your birthday, didn't we? I thought we left it in the study. Why is it here? Ethan didn't follow her gaze. His tone was level, quiet. You couldn't see. Most of your memories were built on guesses. Half touch, half imagination. A lot of it, blurred. She frowned slightly, but he didn't look at her. He didn't need to. Because what he really meant was this. Their entire relationship, everything they'd built during her blindness, was a mirage. She hadn't seen him, not really. She had leaned on him because she had to. Because in the dark, he was her walking stick. Her anchor. Her comfort. But when the world came back into view, he'd faded. Like the quiet background of a room with the lights suddenly switched on. Ethan had believed their history could carry them through the storms ahead. But now? Now it felt like all of it, every soft promise, every touch in the dark, had been smoke on glass. Beautiful. But never meant to last. Vivian must have seen something flicker across his face, because her chest tightened, her words stuck behind her teeth. Before she could speak, Ethan had already turned and walked toward the balcony. "The piano's at the end of the hall," he said over his shoulder. "Last room on the right. Help yourselves." He left them behind, his steps slow but certain. Out on the balcony, Ethan sank into the rocking chair, leaned back, and shut his eyes. The sky had been bright when he arrived, but now the light was thinning. Clouds had gathered above, and a fine mist of rain began to fall. He rose and went inside. That was when he heard it. The music. Liszt's Liebestrom. He stopped in his tracks. The first piano piece he had ever heard in his life. He was 10 years old again, standing at the threshold of the Archer estate for the first time. His mother was introducing him to the staff. And there, in the sunroom, was Vivian, playing that very song, her eyes closed, her hands gliding across the keys like she'd been born to them. It had been his first encounter with beauty. With longing. With her. Drawn like a moth to the flame, Ethan followed the music. When he reached the hallway, he slowed. Through the large pane of the glass partition, he could see them. Vivian and Julian. Seated side by side at the piano. 4 hands moving in perfect harmony. Their bodies leaned into the rhythm, eyes locked, smiles easy. Like no time had passed at all. Like the years in between had never happened. Like Ethan had never been there. Even after all these years, their rhythm hadn't changed. Vivian and Julian played like time had never touched them, 2 sets of hands moving as one, effortlessly syncing like they had 1,000 times before. It was muscle memory. But it was more than that. It was affection, lived in and undiminished. And when the piece came to an end, Vivian turned to look at Julian. Her gaze lingered. Soft. Full of something deep and unmistakable. Love. Still there. Still intact. Even after 7 years of silence and betrayal. She had never stopped loving him. Not for a second. Of course she hadn't. They were made from the same world, blue blood and spotlight. She was a poised, flawless heiress. He was the charming prodigal son. And Ethan? He was the housekeeper's boy. He should have known better. Should have never dared to fall for a girl like her. Should have never dared to believe love could level the playing field. If time could rewind, he wouldn't have let her light blind him. Wouldn't have fallen the day he heard that piano. Wouldn't have stayed when everyone else left her in the dark. Wouldn't have given her 7 years of his life. The music faded. Silence followed. Through the rain-blurred window, he saw Julian reach for her hand, fingertips trailing upward, slow and familiar. Then his palm found her shoulder. His lips sought hers. "Vivian," Julian whispered. "I know you still love me." And that was it. That was the moment Ethan turned away. He didn't watch the kiss. He didn't need to. The rain was coming down harder now, drenching him within seconds. He didn't stop to cover himself. Didn't even flinch. He walked, eyes unfocused, body numb. In his mind, he was a broken thread of grass clinging to the edge of a cliff. A tiny boat capsized by waves no one else saw. He couldn't even cry. The rain stole every tear before it could fall. By the time he got home, his clothes clung to him like a second skin. He didn't bother drying off. He pulled out a suitcase. Then another. And began packing. Quietly. Methodically. The last of his life here. By the time the clock struck 3 a.m., the apartment was bare. Vivian still hadn't come back. And this time, he didn't care. Not anymore. The next morning, Ethan made one last stop. He walked into the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services office and picked up the documents he'd been waiting for. Passport. Visa. Exit clearance. Everything was in order. On the drive home, he booked a one-way ticket for that very afternoon. No delays. No hesitations. But as the car pulled into the driveway, his heart skipped. The black Bentley was there, parked in the courtyard like a shadow from a life he was already leaving behind. He rushed inside. Up the stairs. Down the hallway. And there she was. Vivian. Standing by his half-zipped suitcase. Her hand hovering above the latch. He froze. And before he could stop himself, the words spilled out. "Aren't you supposed to be with Julian? Why are you here?" She turned slowly. And for the first time in days, her expression wasn't tired or guarded. It was offended. "Ethan," she said, her voice low, laced with weary frustration. "What are you imagining now? I told you, there's nothing between Julian and me. Not anymore. Nothing between you?" He almost laughed. But he didn't say it. Didn't tell her he'd seen the kiss. Didn't mention the Hawaii wedding, the sketch, the piano, the whispers in her sleep. Because what was the point? So he smiled. Eyes soft. Voice calm. "Then I must have misunderstood." Vivian studied him carefully. But his face gave nothing away. Satisfied, she let out a breath and stepped closer. "There's a family dinner tonight. My parents finally agreed, you can come with me." That stopped him. Edward? Margaret? They agreed? She smiled faintly at his stunned look, then reached into her bag and pulled out a card. She placed it in his hand. "I told you, I'll make them see you for who you really are. Someday, you'll stand beside me. No more shadows, no more silence. I promise." She ran a hand through his hair. Gently. "I'm exhausted. I'll take a quick nap. Have Paige help you pick out something appropriate to wear, all right?" Ethan stared down at the card in his palm. Gold numbers. Archer Family Banking. He nodded slowly. "You rest. I'll go alone." Vivian sighed, already turning away. "Thanks, Ethan." She lay down on the bed and drifted off almost immediately. He stood there for a moment. Watching her. The same face he'd memorized when she was 17. The same soft curve of her cheek. The same furrow between her brows when she dreamed. Without thinking, he reached out one last time. His fingers traced her brow, then drifted downward, barely grazing the skin. And just as he was about to pull away, she stirred. Murmured softly, almost inaudibly. "Julian, stop messing around." Ethan froze. Then smiled. Not bitterly. Not sadly. Just, quietly. He withdrew his hand. Walked out of the room. And never looked back. The house was silent. Staff resting. Curtains drawn. No one saw him leave. Downstairs, he slipped on his coat. Grabbed his bag. Walked out the front door like he was going for groceries. But he didn't stop walking. On the highway, the world moved fast outside the window. He didn't look back. At the airport, he moved quickly, checking his bag, passing security, watching his boarding gate appear on the screen. Then he opened his phone. He went to Vivian's contact. Blocked. Deleted. Then Julian's. Gone. Then he opened every social media account, every thread of digital memory. And deleted it all. One by one, until he disappeared. A number on a flight manifest. A name that would fade. Before boarding, he made one last call. Margaret answered on the first ring. "Ethan," she said, her voice sweet with satisfaction. "So? Are you where you promised you'd be?" "At the airport. Boarding now." He could almost hear her smile. Good. As long as you don't show up at tonight's dinner, the rest of the money will be in your account by midnight. Goodbye, Ethan. A pause. He looked around, at the bright lights, the motion, the calm urgency of people going places they didn't need permission to reach. Then he said, "Goodbye." He ended the call, dropped the phone into the trash, and walked toward the gate. Step by step. No looking back. Big strides. No regret. No return. Vivian's sleep was restless. A low fever of memory stirred beneath her skin, images rising from the dark, shadows of the years when sight had abandoned her. In her dream, the world was blind again. The walls were unfamiliar. Her breath came fast. She reached out, hands grasping at empty air. The fear was thick, suffocating. And this time, the boy who used to guide her through the dark wasn't there. Ethan. His name slipped from her lips, barely a whisper. Her brows drew tight. Her chest rose and fell in ragged waves. She was trapped in the nightmare, her body reacting before her mind could process it. In the dream, she searched frantically, calling for him, reaching, begging. But no matter how loud she screamed, the silence swallowed everything. No footsteps. No warmth. No Ethan. Her eyes flew open. Sweat clung to her temples, her breathing rapid. The blackout curtains turned the room into a void. And for one terrifying moment, she couldn't tell if she was awake, or still dreaming. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She sat up, voice shaky. Ethan? Nothing. She tried again. Louder. Ethan. Still silence. Vivian shoved the sheets aside and stumbled toward the nightstand, her fingers fumbling for the switch. The room flooded with light. Her eyes scanned the space. Empty. Perfectly arranged. Undisturbed. She stood still for a beat, head pounding, stomach hollow. Where is he? Her panic rose again. Vivian yanked open the bedroom door and stepped into the hall. The villa was quiet, eerily so. Downstairs, a few housekeepers were tidying up the living room. They looked up as she appeared on the landing. "Good afternoon, Miss Archer," one of them offered politely. She barely nodded, voice sharp with urgency. "Where's Ethan?" They blinked. "Ethan," one echoed. "We haven't seen him. Wasn't he resting with you upstairs?" Vivian opened her mouth to respond, but her phone buzzed in her robe pocket. The alert tone was familiar. She glanced down. A voice message, from Julian. Her jaw clenched. She tapped the audio. "Vivian, the light in my living room just went out. No one's home right now. Can you come help me?" Her brows furrowed. She was about to ignore it. Then came another. "I know you're taking Vale to the Archer dinner tonight, but I'm alone. And without the light, I just..." The message ended in something between a sigh and a quiet sob. She stared at the screen for a long moment. Something heavy pressed against her spine. Behind her, the house was silent. Before she could question the impulse, she turned back toward the room. "Let me know if Ethan returns," she told the staff downstairs. "Call me right away." Without waiting for acknowledgement, she slipped inside, changed clothes, grabbed her keys. She didn't look around the room again. Didn't notice the missing suitcase. Didn't notice the empty drawer. Didn't see the gap in the closet where his coat used to hang. She just walked out the door. And drove away. When Vivian arrived at Julian's home, she barely had time to turn the doorknob before the scent of bergamot and silk-soft linen drifted out to greet her. Inside, Julian was lounging sideways on the couch, a loosely tied robe slipping off one shoulder, exposing a swath of pale, smooth skin. The moment he heard the door creak open, he stirred, his eyes still clouded with the haze of sleep, voice low and expectant. "Vivian, you came." A smile bloomed on his lips, boyish and warm. He jumped up like a child released from stillness and ran straight into her arms, burying himself against her chest with such familiarity it sent an involuntary shiver through her spine. "You're barely dressed," she murmured, holding him out of instinct more than thought. "You'll catch a cold like this." "I was scared," he whispered, voice muffled against her collarbone. "If you hadn't come, I don't know what I would have done tonight. Being alone." It was the kind of thing he always said, soft, fragile, just enough to pull at her need to protect. Without fully meaning to, she found herself replying, "Then why don't you come with me tonight? Back to the Archer dinner." The words slipped out like breath. And the moment they did, regret hit her square in the chest. She opened her mouth to retract, to soften it somehow, but Julian was already looking up at her, wide-eyed, shimmering. "Really?" he asked, hope crashing into every syllable. "You mean it?" She hesitated. Her silence said enough. His face shifted. His eyes grew glassy. Then, without warning, tears began to fall, quiet, dramatic, unstoppable. "Vivian," he choked. "Is it too much? Am I making it hard for you? It's okay, really. If it's too much for you, I won't come. I don't want to cause trouble." She should have said something to calm him. In the past, she always did. But today. Vivian just exhaled slowly, like a weight had lifted. She reached up and gently patted his hair. "Tonight's a little complicated," she said quietly. "It's probably best if you don't come." Julian froze. His lips parted in disbelief. Then the disbelief hardened, just briefly, into something darker. But just as fast, the hurt rushed back in, replacing it. The tears came again, fatter now, shameless, as he crumbled onto the couch like a child denied his favorite toy. "Vivian." She didn't hear him. Not really. Her mind was somewhere else. A flicker of a dream. A name. A missing presence. Ethan. That nightmare from earlier, it wouldn't leave her. The fear it stirred had begun to pulse again at the base of her skull, buzzing like a low-grade fever. "Is this the one?" she asked, pointing vaguely toward the ceiling light above them. "Is this the one that's broken?" Julian didn't respond. He just sulked in silence, arms crossed, lower lip trembling. Vivian barely noticed. Something inside her had begun to spin out of control. A knot of dread curling in her gut. Julian must have sensed her slipping away. He crawled toward her on the couch, tugging at her sleeve with a trembling hand. "Vivian, what's wrong? You're scaring me." She blinked as if waking up, the pressure in her chest making her breath shallow. A slick sheen of sweat lined her forehead. "Nothing," she muttered, brushing him off and reaching for her phone. She hit Ethan's name. The call rang. And rang. And rang. No answer. The automated beep sounded again. She tried again. And again. Nothing. The busy tone filled the room like static, aggravating, sterile, cold. "Julian," she said suddenly, her voice clipped. "I have to go. I'll send someone over to fix the light." Before he could say another word, she was already moving. No apology. No explanation. Just the sharp click of heels against the floor, the creak of a door opening, and then she was gone. Julian stared at the closed door for a long time. And for the first time that day, his face was completely still. The door slammed shut with a heavy, final thud. Julian stood frozen for a moment, staring at the polished wood as if it had just betrayed him. Then the fury erupted. His eyes darkened, lips twisted into a silent snarl. The bitterness that had simmered beneath the surface all day now surged to the top, sharp and poisonous. Of course. Of course she left so suddenly. She wasn't worried about him. She had gone chasing after that pathetic bastard. Ethan. That lowly parasite. Julian snatched up his phone and his fingers flew across the screen. Ethan, how pathetic can you be? Hiding like some dirty little secret, do you enjoy being someone's shameful affair? Why don't you just drop dead? The second he hit send, a red exclamation mark blinked up on the screen. Blocked. Ethan had blocked him. Something cold unfurled in Julian's chest, prickling his skin. A creeping dread. Panic. No, no, no. He immediately deleted the message, as if erasing it could undo whatever had just slipped from his control. Back at the house, Vivian shoved the front door open, her breath tight, heart pounding. She scanned the living room. No Ethan. Still no sign of him. Her voice cracked as she called out, the panic already fraying the edges of her composure. Is Ethan not back yet? A housekeeper turned from the far side of the room. We haven't seen Mr. Vale since this afternoon. Then another chimed in, a little uncertain. Miss, when we were tidying up earlier, we noticed something strange. Mr. Vale's belongings, they're gone. The words hit her like a winter gust, cold and disorienting. What do you mean gone? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The housekeeper tilted her head, puzzled by the question. I thought you had them packed up, Mississippi. All his clothes were missing. I figured maybe you were planning to buy him new ones. Vivian's heart thudded painfully against her ribs. She spun around, scanning the room, as if Ethan might suddenly appear from behind a door or step out from the shadows. Ethan, she called out, breathless, frightened. Again and again she whispered his name, hoping the sound alone would summon him back. But the silence answered her each time. No footsteps. No voice. Just absence. The idea began to form slowly, unthinkably. Had he left? Left her? No. No, that wasn't possible. Ethan, she called out louder now, the desperation cracking through her composure. This isn't funny. Okay? Come out. Please don't joke like this, it's not funny at all. She was moving now, searching the hallway, scanning the corners, peeking into rooms as if he'd been hiding behind curtains all along. I was wrong this morning, I know that. But Julian and we're just friends. Please, Ethan, please believe me. But something was different. The house, it was emptier. It wasn't just that he wasn't there. It was that nothing of him was. The photos of the two of them on the mantel, gone. His cologne on the dresser, gone. The drawer that used to hold his watch, his passport, the cufflinks he always forgot to wear, empty. Gone. All of it. Vivian stumbled back, a strangled breath escaping her lips. Her whole body trembled as she pulled out her phone with shaking hands. She dialed Ethan's number. Ring. 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 No answer. She dialed again. Nothing. She opened his chat thread, fingers moving fast, typing message after message, but the moment she hit send, all she saw was the glaring red exclamation mark. Blocked. She was blocked. Ethan had cut her off completely. Vivian stood in the middle of the living room, her phone falling slowly to her side, her knees buckling beneath the weight of realization. He had really left her. And this time, she had no idea if he was ever coming back. Her pupils dilated instantly, body trembling as if struck by lightning. A tidal wave of panic swallowed her whole. With numb fingers, Vivian frantically scrolled through her phone, searching every platform for any trace of Ethan. Nothing. Every account linked to him, gone. He had deleted everything. Her vision blurred at the edges, a searing white static buzzing in her skull. No matter how hard she tried to think, she couldn't come up with a single place he might have gone. His father had died when Ethan was just a child. His mother had passed 2 years ago after a long illness. There was no family. No home to return to. Only friends. Vivian latched onto the thought and began dialing, grasping at the last thread of hope. "Hi, it's Vivian. Is Ethan with you?" "What? What are you talking about? Why would Ethan be here?" Call after call. Friend after friend. Each answer a dead end. Even her own circle, none of them knew where Ethan had gone. The sheer helplessness, the brutal, echoing void of not knowing, crushed her again and again like waves breaking against bone. She felt like she'd fallen back into that nightmare, the one without Ethan. Only now, it was real. And the ache, oh, the ache, was a raw, gaping wound in her chest. Every moment she had spent with him replayed in her mind. Every smile. Every word. Every moment she took for granted. Now he was gone. And the pain of it was like having the flesh torn from her heart. "Ethan," she whispered at first, then screamed, voice cracking, throat raw. "Ethan, please. Don't do this to me. I just want to see you." The sound that came out of her mouth didn't sound like her own, it was the guttural cry of something wounded, primal, something bereft. She stumbled, barely upright, like a lioness stripped of her mate, blind with grief, fury, and disbelief. Why? She asked herself. Why had it come to this? She played every memory in her mind, rewinding through the days, the silences, the sidelong glances. And then, one moment flashed sharp and searing in her memory. The day he heard her speaking Italian with her friends. The way his body stiffened. The look in his eyes. She had brushed it off then. But now? "Has Ethan ever studied Italian?" she blurted, voice tight with something like dread. The housekeeper flinched slightly at the sudden question, eyes cautious. "Mr. Vale has been studying foreign languages these past few years, Mississippi. He even hired a private tutor. Didn't you know?" Thud. A string in her mind snapped clean. The silence that followed was deafening. He had understood. He had understood every word of that conversation. He knew. He knew about the marriage. He knew she had lied. Vivian's breath caught painfully in her throat, like she'd swallowed shards of glass. Her mind raced back again, to all the times she thought she was being careful. All the times she'd tiptoed around the truth, believing she could balance both Julian and Ethan without consequence. Julian had been nothing but a ghost of an obsession, a wound she refused to let scar over. She had been furious when he left her for someone else. So she'd pulled him back. Possessed him like a trophy. But Ethan. Ethan was the man who had stood by her when the world turned its back. He was the only one she'd truly loved, especially after he lost his sight. But now she saw the truth. He had never really been blind. Not to the things that mattered. He'd seen everything. And he'd walked away. But how could he be so heartless? All she'd done was hold on to a fleeting obsession from the past. All she'd felt was a bit of pity for Julian. And yet Ethan had erased every trace of himself. Vanished. Completely. Tears blurred her vision, the screen of her phone melting into a haze of grief. Her breath hitched as memories came rushing back, those years Ethan had stood by her side, the way his voice had been the only thing that grounded her in the darkness. "Don't be scared, Vivian. I'll always be here for you." Always? As long as you never betray me, then yes, always. She remembered wrapping her arms around the teenage boy who had made that promise, her voice thick with emotion. "I would never betray you. It's a promise. You'll stay with me forever." But when had it all started to change? Was it Julian's constant pleas? His pitiful, tearful face? Little by little, she had started treating Ethan's presence as something inevitable. A given. She'd begun to remember the man who had once left her, Julian, broken and abandoned. And conveniently, he had come back into her life just when he needed saving. And she, foolishly, believed she could save him without losing anything else. She thought she could control it all. Play both parts. Keep both men in her orbit. But she forgot. Ethan may have had no one else left in the world, but he was never the kind to grovel. He would never stay to be quietly destroyed. Rather than suffer, he'd simply disappear. And Ethan, of all people, knew her too well. Knew that if she had any inkling he was planning to leave, she'd stop him. She'd throw every trick she had at him to make him stay. So he left her nothing. No note. No number. No way to reach him. He disappeared, utterly and completely, from her world. And now that she understood the whole truth, Vivian trembled with helpless rage. "No," she whispered hoarsely, shaking her head. "No, Ethan. I'm not letting you go. That's not going to happen." Again and again, she whispered his name like a prayer, like a curse, like a plea that echoed through every hollow space inside her. "Ethan. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done this to you, not for another man. You can yell at me, hit me, hate me. Do whatever you want, but please, please don't leave." She repeated the apology over and over again until her voice frayed into broken threads. But he wasn't there to hear it. And that silence was the cruelest part of all. "Ethan," she cried out, her voice cracking, "I will find you. I don't care how far you've gone. I'll cross the ends of the earth if I have to." Her eyes sharpened, no longer pleading but resolute, hard as flint. Let him run. Let him hide. She wasn't giving up. He belonged to her. She'd get on her knees. She'd beg. She'd do whatever it took to make him forgive her. But she would not allow Ethan to leave her life. Not now. Not ever. With a trembling hand, she opened her photo album. There it was, his face, frozen in digital memory. Smiling, gentle, safe. Vivian brought the screen to her lips, and pressed a kiss to it with the quiet reverence of someone worshipping at a shrine. The plane touched down in Melbourne just before dawn. At immigration, the officer flipped through his documents, asking a series of routine questions. "Mr. Vale, how long do you plan to stay in Australia?" Ethan offered a polite smile. "Good morning. I've accepted a position with a company here in Melbourne. My work visa's already been approved. I'm planning to stay for 2 years, for now." The officer gave a curt nod and, without further hassle, stamped his passport and waved him through. Ethan thanked him courteously, collected his luggage, and stepped out into the cool, still air of the early morning. Outside, he pulled out his brand new phone and searched for the location of the hotel he'd booked. Then, hailing a cab, he climbed in and rode through the quiet streets. Once he reached the hotel, he checked in, took the keycard, and opened the door to a spotless, neatly arranged room. The sight alone was enough to peel away the last layer of adrenaline holding him upright. He unpacked a few essentials, went downstairs for a late dinner, then returned, showered, and collapsed onto the soft bed. Sleep took him almost instantly. And for the first time in weeks, he slept deeply, without interruption. He woke up the next afternoon, disoriented and groggy. For a moment, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, he couldn't remember where he was. The room was bright and hot, the summer sun pouring through the windows. Slowly, the reality caught up with him. He was no longer home. He was in Melbourne. In a brand new country. Starting a brand new life. Peeling off the heavy sheets, he changed into a t-shirt, stepped out for lunch, then headed toward the neighborhood near his new company to check out the apartment he'd arranged in advance. The landlord met him on time, handed over the keys, and walked him through the place. It was empty but spacious and filled with light. Ethan made a mental list of everything he'd need to furnish the place. Then he hired a cleaner to deep scrub the apartment before moving in. By sundown, he returned with his luggage and began settling in. The next few days were spent in quiet busyness. He bought dishes, furniture, cooking tools, and even a few decorations. What had started as a hollow, echoing space slowly transformed into something resembling a home. He messaged his soon-to-arrive roommate with updates, sending photos of the setup and asking about shared essentials. Each day, the unfamiliar city felt a little more manageable. Thanks to his excellent cooking skills, and his youthful energy, it didn't take long for Ethan to connect with people nearby. A few local universities surrounded the area, and before he knew it, he'd slipped seamlessly into a group of international students. 2 neighbors, both guys around his age, took him under their wing. They invited him out, showed him the best local restaurants, gave him tours of nearby attractions, and pulled him into their easy rhythm of work, life, and exploration. During the day, he worked diligently at the company. At night or on weekends, he wandered the city, slowly discovering what it meant to build something entirely new from the ground up. And somehow, amid it all, his days started to feel full again. That morning, a soft clattering noise came from the front door. Still groggy with sleep, Ethan shuffled out of his bedroom, rubbing his eyes. In the entryway stood a boy in his early 20s, pushing a suitcase and offering a shy smile. "Hey, are you Ethan? I'm Liam, your new roommate." Only then did Ethan remember, his roommate had mentioned a few days ago that he'd be arriving in Melbourne today. Ethan quickly stepped forward, welcoming him in with a handshake, helping Liam carry his bags inside, and giving a quick tour of the apartment. It didn't take long. By the end of the morning, the two of them, who had previously only exchanged a few messages online, were chatting like old friends. That afternoon, they decided to hit the supermarket together for groceries. Liam was still a student. His semester was starting in just a few days, and Ethan, wanting to make him feel at home, cooked a full dinner spread that evening and invited over a few of his new local friends for a casual get-together. Over the course of the meal, something shifted. The laughter grew louder. The wine bottles steadily emptied. Warm faces flushed pink. Even the surest ones began loosening up. Somewhere along the way, someone brought up their ex. At first, it was jokes. Silly complaints. Petty gripes. Then it spiraled. One guy laughed until he cried, another was laughing through actual tears. The stories turned more ridiculous by the minute, and Liam, who had barely touched his beer, was laughing so hard he nearly choked. He nudged Ethan with his elbow, grinning. "Come on, Ethan. What about you?" Ethan froze for a beat, expression distant. For a moment, he saw her again, Vivian. That whole twisted history. Those 7 years. And yet, it didn't sting the way it once had. Still, seated here among boys just a few years younger, students full of wide-eyed ambition and heartbreaks that hadn't carved too deep, he didn't know how to explain. Not without sounding like a man twice his age. The energy around the table flickered, then stalled. A soft pause. Liam, sensing the shift, quickly jumped in to change the subject. The conversation veered off without anyone making it awkward. Later, after everyone had left and the last dishes had been put away, Liam, sobering up just enough, shuffled over to Ethan, eyes a little embarrassed. "Hey, man. I'm sorry. I had a bit too much. I didn't mean to put you on the spot." Ethan smiled. He wasn't upset. He reached over and ruffled Liam's hair, like an older brother. "Don't worry about it. Go get some rest." Once the apartment was quiet again, Ethan finished tidying up, showered, and got into bed. He unlocked his phone and opened the Instagram account he'd created right before coming to Australia. Only one person had the handle, his closest friend. No one else knew where he was now, or how to reach him. But tonight, staring at the screen, Ethan blinked in surprise. Dozens of new messages. All in the span of a few hours. He tapped the first one open, and immediately saw her name. Vivian. And she wasn't the only one. Nearly every message, some from strangers, some from mutuals, some anonymous, were somehow about her. Vivian seriously messed up, man. Wasn't she all lovey-dovey with her ex not too long ago? The moment you disappeared, it was like lightning struck, suddenly she realized how much you meant to her. Like she's the lead in some rom-com or something. She really thinks a couple of teary apologies are gonna win you back. Hilarious. She hits me up every few days, asking where you are. But don't worry, I'm not selling you out. Oh, and get this, about a month ago, she blew up at her mom during some family dinner. Apparently started screaming that her mom was the one who drove you away. But let's be honest here, this is all on her. Playing both sides like that? Lying to your face? Her mom had nothing to do with it. And lately she's been drowning herself in alcohol, like, full-blown binge mode. Heard she almost drank herself into a bleeding ulcer. Ended up in the ICU. Doctor straight up told her if she keeps going like this, she's done for. Honestly, it's a miracle she made it out alive. There were more messages like that, long threads of people cursing Vivian, roasting her, retelling the same spiral in different words. But Ethan felt nothing. Not anger. Not pity. Nothing. The name Vivian no longer caused a ripple inside him. The drama, the pain, the chaos, it all felt like a memory from another lifetime. He stood up and pulled the curtains open. The morning light flooded the room. The sky was a clear, impossible blue, like polished sapphire, gleaming edge to edge. The warmth soaked into his skin, chased out the last bits of cold that had clung to him for too long. Ethan. I'm heading to class. Liam's voice rang out cheerfully from the hallway, full of life and promise. Ethan smiled and called back, "Don't rush, take your time." Then he picked up his phone, tapped out a message, his voice light and easy when he hit record. From now on, I don't need to hear anything else about Vivian. Just like that, the last of the fog lifted. The tightness in his chest was gone. The world was real again. His own. When Vivian came to, everything around her was a blur of white. The sharp sting of disinfectant clung to her nostrils, the sterile tang of alcohol clashing with the sour weight churning in her gut. Her head pounded, her body felt drained and heavy, and the dull ache in her stomach reminded her just how close she'd come to the edge. Shapes slowly sharpened into faces. Margaret stood at her bedside, red-eyed and fuming. "For a man like that, you're really ready to throw your life away," she snapped, voice cracking. "He's just the son of a maid. What exactly do you see in him?" Other women, Vivian's so-called friends, had gathered around too. Their expressions were softer, but their words were no less biting. "He's been gone for a month now. Not a single word. You don't think he's doing that on purpose? Let him go, Viv. It's not worth it." She'd heard it all before. Every variation, every version, every attempt to talk some sense into her. And every time, she'd let it wash over her like static, just background noise behind the hollow in her chest. Her eyes, rimmed in red, stared straight ahead. Unblinking. Lips pressed into a pale, stubborn line. The elegant face that once graced glossy magazines was now shadowed with exhaustion, streaked with faded makeup and emotional bruising. Margaret gave her one last look, one of frustration more than concern, then turned on her heel and slammed the door behind her. The silence that followed was absolute. The women exchanged uneasy glances, unsure whether to stay or leave. Vivian, one of them finally ventured, voice cautious, "With your status and your looks, you could have any man you want. There's no reason to keep clinging to Ethan. Yeah, another chimed in, you should be showing him you're thriving without him. That you have options. That he was lucky to have you in the first place. And if you really can't let go, hell, we could find you someone who looks like Ethan. You mold him a little, and voila, problem solved, right? A loud crack split the air. The glass of water Vivian had been holding shattered at their feet, icy droplets splashing across their ankles. No one moved. No one dared speak. They stood frozen, eyes wide, barely breathing. Because beneath all their words, all their casual cruelty dressed up as concern, they knew the truth. They used to scoff at Ethan, the way he trailed behind Vivian like a shadow, doting on her during her blindness, utterly devoted. A nobody. A cast-off. A poor man in a rich woman's world. But slowly, that contempt had twisted into envy. They were all daughters of privilege, socialites born into power and old money. Men came and went in their lives, names blurred and faces forgettable. But none of them, not a single one, had ever encountered a man like Ethan. A man who loved with such fierce, unguarded sincerity. A man who stayed. They'd tried to convince Vivian to move on. They introduced her to new men, whispered names and arranged meetings under the guise of casual brunches or charity galas. But even after regaining her sight, even after rising to become a force in the social elite, Vivian never once strayed. Her world still revolved around Ethan. Until Julian came back. They saw the cracks forming. And while they played the part of concerned friends, in truth, they helped push her. Because if Vivian could fall, if even she could be swayed, then Ethan was no different. Just another man in a world that devoured loyalty and spat out illusion. Now that Ethan was gone, they expected her to spiral, to self-destruct in lavish abandon. But instead, she snapped. When they offered advice, she turned on them with a fury none had ever seen. Get out. All of you, Vivian's voice cut like ice. And if I ever hear another word of disrespect about Ethan, I swear, I won't be responsible for what happens to your families. The silence that followed was absolute. Faces drained of color. Smiles faltered. One by one, they offered excuses and fled the room. The last woman to leave paused at the door, lips curled in spite. As soon as she stepped out, she pulled out her phone and sent a photo of Ethan to her assistant. Memorize this face. Find me a man who looks exactly like him. The closer the match, the better. She turned to glare at the door one last time, voice bitter with scorn. Let's see how long Vivian can keep up this act. Vivian stayed in the hospital a few more days before checking herself out early. The very next day after realizing Ethan had left, she filed for divorce. She didn't hesitate. Julian cried, quiet tears, the kind that clung to the corners of his eyes without falling. He didn't fight her, didn't beg. He simply accompanied her to the courthouse, staring at her with a soft, misted gaze. Be happy, he said gently, voice barely above a whisper. She had plenty of resentment toward Julian, but in that moment, seeing him so composed, so yielding, she couldn't bring herself to scold him. Instead, she promised not to announce the divorce to the public just yet. Vivian pulled up to Julian's house, engine still humming as she stepped out of the car. She walked up to the door, already reaching for the handle when a voice from inside pierced the silence. That bastard Ethan. He saw the texts, didn't he? If he had any pride, he would have just died instead of playing this disappearing act. It's been a month, why is Vivian still not over him? What the hell does that cheap piece of trash have that I don't? A giggle. Then a low murmur, laced with seduction. Baby, why are you jealous? I've only ever loved you. The words sliced into Vivian like freshly honed blades, sharp and relentless. Her breath caught, ragged and trembling. Her knuckles whitened around the doorknob. And then, bam, the door slammed open. Inside, Julian froze. He scrambled to end the call, his phone slipping awkwardly into his pocket. A nervous smile twitched at the corners of his lips. "Vivian. You're out of the hospital already? I thought you still needed. Who were you talking to?" Her voice was ice. Flat, cutting, merciless. Julian blinked rapidly, pupils dilated. He forced a light laugh. Just a friend. She was asking if I liked any new desserts at that cafe downtown. I was feeling down after our separation, so I said some random stuff to brush her off. That's all. Oh. Vivian's smile was like a crack in glass. Cold. Fragile. Ready to shatter. Then tell me, who were you calling a bastard? Who, she stepped forward, every inch a predator, is jealous of you? Julian went pale. He reached for her arm, desperation leaking through his fingers like sweat. No, Vivian, I swear, you heard wrong. My friend was upset because I haven't been around to shop with her lately, that's all. No one said anything about Ethan, I promise. She ripped her arm free. Her eyes, once filled with sorrow, now glinted with something far darker. What did you do behind my back? Her voice trembled, not with fear, but rage. What exactly did you say or do to drive Ethan away? Julian burst into tears. Just like all the other times, the sobs came fast and hard. His breath hitched, and fat tears rolled down his cheeks. He looked up at her with the same pleading, pitiful eyes he always used. I didn't do anything. I only found out when you told me. Vivian, please, you have to believe me. But this time. There was no softness left in her. No flicker of doubt. No space for mercy. Only silence, and contempt. Vivian yanked his wrist with a strength that made Julian gasp. Her grip tightened, digging into his skin like she wanted to shatter bone. Julian, she said, her voice low and dangerous, I don't have the patience to play games with you. Her face twisted, not with sorrow, but rage. The polished mask she once wore had completely cracked. You better start talking. Now. All of it. Every word, every detail. Or I swear. She leaned in, eyes sharp as knives. You know I've never been the forgiving type. Julian's tears dried up instantly. His arms dropped helplessly to his sides, and he stared at her, stunned. He didn't understand. She used to fall apart the moment he cried. She'd rush to soothe him, hold him, defend him against the world. But now? Now she looked at him like he was nothing more than a stain on the floor. Cold. Detached. Utterly unmoved. His lips trembled. He clung to his last defense. Vivian. I didn't do anything to Ethan. Please, believe me. Vale's a good man. He's helped me so much, I'd never do anything to hurt him. He tried to sound sincere, swallowing his guilt like broken glass. Sure, maybe he didn't like me much, maybe he's still mad, but, Vivian, you can't treat me like this just because he left. Another couple of tears fell. Forced. Calculated. He knew Vivian. She always had a soft heart, for him. He just had to outlast her fury. Make her question what she thought she'd heard. Blame it on a friend. Insist he was misunderstood. With time, she'd come back to him. She always did. But today, something had changed. Vivian's lips curled into a cold, bitter smile. There was no softness behind it, only contempt. Still playing innocent? She let out a harsh chuckle. You really don't know when to stop, do you? She leaned closer, her voice laced with venom. You've known me for years. And you still don't understand, I don't bluff, Julian. My patience has a limit. Before he could blink, she slammed his head against the table with a dull thud. Julian let out a muffled cry, pain flaring across his forehead, but even that wasn't what made his blood run cold. No, it was her next words. Fine. If you won't talk to me, I'll just let your family know where you are. I'm sure they'll be thrilled to come collect you. That, more than anything else, made his soul convulse with terror. Visions of his father flashed through his mind, cold, furious, demanding. The kind of man who'd sell his own son to settle a debt. Who once told Julian he'd better marry a rich, aging heiress or prepare to be cut off and dragged back. No, no, don't call them. Please, Vivian, please. Panic took over. He was nearly hyperventilating. I'll talk. I'll tell you everything, I swear. Only then did she release her grip. Talk. The moment she spoke, the cold air hit his throat like ice. Julian choked and coughed, struggling to breathe, but dared not stop. Between gasps, he whimpered, "Why, you can check my phone." Fumbling, he unlocked it with trembling fingers and thrust it into her hands. "I didn't do anything, I swear, it's all just a misunderstanding." He was secretly relieved. He'd deleted every incriminating message, every smug little taunt he'd sent Ethan. But Vivian only glanced at the screen before her eyes narrowed. He was still pretending. Without a word, she snatched the phone and turned her back on him, dialing someone. Julian's heart dropped. When he realized what she was doing, panic overtook him. "Vivian, no, please, please, don't send it for data recovery." He clung to her arm, his voice raw with fear. "Just this once, trust me, please don't do this." But Vivian didn't even look at him. She had already given him more chances than he deserved. And now, there was nothing left to salvage. As Julian crumpled to the floor, sobbing and desperate, Vivian kept her voice cold and steady. She gave her assistant clear instructions: dig up everything. She wanted to know what else Julian had done to Ethan. Every word, every scheme. The restored files and chat records were delivered the next day. Vivian had spent the previous evening walking through her house, quietly replacing every single item Ethan had once used. The same brand of coffee, the exact piano bench, the same brand of cologne in the hallway cabinet. A fragile illusion, one she clung to. But even with all those familiar objects in place, the house felt hollow. Empty. Dead. Ethan was gone. And nothing, not even this carefully constructed memory, could fill the space he'd left behind. Vivian sat down and stared at the folder in front of her for a long time. Finally, she opened it. The newest file was a video, taken the day Ethan left. Julian had filmed them secretly, catching the moment Ethan leaned in to kiss her beside the piano. Overlaid text floated across the screen. "Bet you didn't know this is Vivian's favorite spot. I won't film what happens next, wouldn't want to traumatize you. Still pretending to be clueless? You really are pathetic." Vivian's hand trembled. Scrolling up revealed more messages, each more vile than the last, mocking, taunting, gloating. Photos. Videos. Every frame a calculated blow. And on Instagram, dozens of posts. Sweet, tender captions. Kisses. Smiles. All set to visible only to Ethan. Vivian's fury surged like a tidal wave. But then she opened the folder. And what she saw froze her blood. The men at the auction. The staged fight. Ethan, shoved to the ground. Julian had orchestrated all of it. And she had stood there. She had watched Ethan on the floor, humiliated, his face pale with pain. And she had walked away. Worse, she'd yelled at him. Demanded he drink wine he wasn't allowed to touch. Her hands clutched the edge of the table as the memory hit her like a freight train. The sadness in Ethan's eyes. That quiet little smile when she turned away. Vivian's heart stuttered violently. Then came the pain. Blinding. tearing. A hollow scream beneath her ribs. As if someone had sliced her open from the inside and left her bleeding on the cold marble floor. "Bring Julian here." Vivian's voice was so cold it seemed to drip with venom. Within minutes, Julian was shoved into the room. His eyes swept across the photos scattered on the floor, his expression blanched in an instant. He collapsed to his knees and crawled toward Vivian's feet like a drowning man grasping for air. "Vivian, I'm sorry, God, I'm so sorry. I did those things because I love you. Everything I said to him, it was just jealousy, I lost control. But it's only because I wanted to stand beside you. To deserve you." Vivian let out a low, contemptuous laugh. She reached down and seized his jaw with so much force that a bruise began blooming across his cheek almost instantly. "I told you more than once, never involve Ethan in what I do for you. Never speak of it in front of him. Were you deaf, or just stupid?" She threw his face aside as if he were filth. "And now that you've driven him away, you'll deal with the consequences." Julian collapsed, but before she could turn away, he dragged himself back again, his voice trembling and thick with tears. "Please, Vivian, please forgive me. I'll do anything." But she didn't even look at him. That's when Julian truly panicked. The Hart family wasn't what it used to be. Bankruptcy was always lurking in the background, and if Vivian cast him aside now, he'd be defenseless. He knew what that meant. He knew exactly who they'd sell him to, an aging pervert with too much money and no conscience. Julian's blood drained from his face. In a blind frenzy, he lunged for his phone, fingers shaking as he tried to call Margaret. But Vivian moved faster. She kicked the phone across the floor before the call could go through, then rose slowly to her feet. With deliberate calm, she placed her toe beneath his chin and tilted his face upward. Her gaze was icy. "I've already finalized the divorce. Whether you agree or not doesn't matter anymore. And don't you dare try any more of your cheap little tricks." She took a step closer, voice cutting like steel. "When I find Ethan, you're going to apologize. Properly. If he chooses to forgive you, maybe, I'll let you live." There was no room for argument. No opening. No hope. In her world, Julian would always be the one crawling, never the one standing. Julian collapsed fully, his limbs trembling. He told himself it wasn't over. If she let him stay close, even in this pitiful state, he could still worm his way back into her life. But Vivian wasn't about to make that mistake again. She had already betrayed Ethan in too many ways. Keeping Julian around would only drive the final nail in their coffin. Her eyes hardened. "Get him out of here," she told the guards. Two men stepped forward. No, wait, Vivian, please." Julian fought, kicked, sobbed. "I'm sorry. I'll fix it. I swear, just let me stay." But it was no use. He was dragged away like garbage, his cries echoing behind him, his tears falling like rain. Vivian didn't flinch. Not once. Vivian found herself once again in the dimly lit private booth of the bar she used to frequent, Ethan's least favorite place. She sat alone, drinking furiously. Her mind was a blur, but one thing was painfully clear: she hadn't had a decent night's sleep since he left. The villa no longer smelled like Ethan. It no longer felt like home. His presence had faded, as if the air itself had chosen to forget him. She couldn't bear to return there anymore. So she hid here instead, throwing back drink after drink, trying to blur the edges of her grief. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she whispered hoarsely, tilting her head back with another shot. "Didn't you always hate seeing me like this? Come stop me then. Ethan, just come stop me." As if answering a summons, someone knocked at the door. She ignored it. No one should have known she was here. Only a few close friends knew of this booth, and she hadn't told them anything tonight. But the knocking didn't stop. It grew more persistent. Then the door creaked open. "Get the hell." She spun around, voice sharp as a blade, only to freeze. Standing there was a young man pushing a service cart filled with drinks and snacks. "Hi," he said politely. "Did someone here order this?" The voice. That voice. Her heart skipped a beat. Her vision swam. "Ethan?" The boy blinked, clearly startled. He took a small step back, brow furrowing in confusion. "Sorry, who?" The angle of his chin, the tilt of his mouth, the softness in his tone, it was all so familiar. For a moment, she could have sworn it was Ethan. Not the man who left her, but Ethan as he'd been in college. Younger. Untouched by time. But his eyes, those unknowing, unfeeling eyes, told her the truth. This boy wasn't him. He wasn't even 20. Vivian's throat closed up. Her body tensed with the effort of holding herself together. "What's your name?" she asked, voice trembling. The boy took another step back, startled. "Sorry. I must have entered the wrong room." He turned to leave, but she reached out, grabbing his wrist. Her hand was shaking. Tears spilled down her face, landing warm and heavy on the boy's skin. He froze. Then, slowly, he reached into the cart and pulled out a tissue, awkwardly handing it to her. "Hey, are you okay? You should, probably dry your face." Vivian looked up again. Her eyes had cleared, but her expression remained unreadable. "You work here?" she asked. "Quit." The boy blinked. "What?" "Come with me," she said quietly. "I'll pay you 10 times what they do." The boy recoiled as if she'd slapped him. He yanked his wrist away, face flushing in disbelief. "What do you think I am?" His voice cracked with anger, pure, wounded, real. Without waiting for a response, he turned on his heel and pushed the cart out of the room. Vivian didn't move. She simply stood there, still trembling, watching his figure disappear down the hall. And then she was alone again, with nothing but the silence, and a ghost she couldn't chase back into the light. Her heart pounded violently. Every beat hammered against her ribs like a warning, "Don't do this." Her rational mind screamed that she had to walk away, that chasing this boy was crossing a line she could never uncross. If Ethan ever found out, it would be over. Truly, finally over. But then came the voice. That soft, dangerous whisper in the back of her mind. "You're not doing anything wrong. You're not hurting anyone. It's just a face. Just a memory. Just a moment." The voice grew louder, stronger, more persuasive. "You'll let him go once Ethan comes back. This is only temporary. A harmless mirage." Eventually, the whisper drowned out reason. Vivian pulled out her phone and dialed the owner of the bar. Less than 30 minutes later, a full report appeared in her hands. The boy's name was Jason. A university student. Only recently started working here. He had no family in town. His mother, his only living relative, had fallen seriously ill. Desperate for income, he'd taken a job in this upscale bar, where the tips were decent and the clientele generous. So far, he'd only been handling minor duties, serving drinks, clearing tables. Vivian stared at the photo of him on the report. Her gaze drifted, hollow, haunted. Not really looking at Jason. Looking through him. As if Ethan might somehow be hidden inside. "Bring him in," she said quietly. Jason returned, standing uncertainly at the doorway. His eyes darted around nervously, unsure whether he was in trouble. There was something so innocent in his posture. That anxious tension. The way he held his hands like he wasn't sure where to put them. It was a look Ethan had never worn, not even as a boy. Vivian's voice cut through the silence, sharp and impatient. "Don't look at me like that. I don't bite." Her tone softened, but only barely. "I'll cover your mother's medical bills," she said flatly. "Everything. Full cost. In return, you'll stay by my side." Jason blinked. "What exactly do you want me to do?" He sounded cautious, but not defiant. Vivian stepped closer. Her breath caught in her throat. His face, so close now, was nearly identical. 8 out of 10. Too close for comfort. Too close to resist. "You don't have to do anything," she said, voice low. "Just be there. Wear what I tell you. Stay where I say. I'll handle the rest." Jason looked overwhelmed, but the exit was already blocked. The guards didn't say a word, but their presence was loud enough. Vivian reached out, not to touch him, but to cage him with her words. "And the first thing I need from you," she whispered, eyes locked on his, "is this." Her voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "Promise me you won't leave me again, Ethan." Ever since Jason came into her life, Vivian had stopped mentioning Ethan altogether. At least, not in words. But her silence didn't mean she'd moved on. She was simply waiting. Jason, oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface, grew more brazen by the day. He began posting constant updates on social media, dinners, gifts, candid photos of Vivian smiling beside him, tagged captions dripping with intimacy. The latest video went viral overnight. Vivian had thrown him an extravagant birthday party, and in the final, dazzling scene, she knelt before him and proposed. The moment exploded across the internet. Jason's follower count surged past 5 million in just 2 months. At the end of the video, they announced a wedding scheduled in 2 weeks' time, live-streamed for the world to see. And when the day arrived, it was everything the headlines had promised. Lavish. Opulent. Star-studded. Famous influencers streamed in and out of the venue. Drones buzzed overhead. Hundreds of live streams ran in parallel as curious viewers flooded into every digital portal to witness the spectacle. #1 trending topic on Twitter. Vivian's wedding of the year. At exactly noon, the ceremony began. Everything unfolded with mechanical perfection, just as rehearsed. The vows, the music, the procession. Until the officiant turned to her and asked the final question. "Miss Vivian, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, from this day forward, as long as you both shall live?" Vivian lifted her chin. A soft smile played on her lips, but her voice cut through the silence like a blade of ice. "I do not." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Jason froze. His eyes widened in disbelief as he staggered toward her, clutching her hand. "Vivian, please, this is a joke, right?" She yanked her hand free. He stumbled to the floor, and she towered over him, eyes glinting with disdain. "You," she said, voice full of contempt. "You think you're good enough to marry me? Don't flatter yourself. I know exactly who sent you." Jason's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The live stream cameras swiveled frantically, unsure if they should keep rolling. Vivian turned to them, calm and composed. "Keep broadcasting," she instructed. The chat exploded. Thousands of viewers flooded in, pelting the screen with question marks and exclamations. The bride just rejected the groom, live. Vivian faced the camera now, standing alone beneath the floral arch. "This man," she said, gesturing toward Jason, "was sent by someone who thought they could break me. He was chosen to look like someone I once loved. I pretended to fall for it. I even helped him build a fanbase, just so we could have this moment, today." The giant screen behind her flickered. Jason's curated videos began to vanish. In their place, a photo of Ethan appeared. A soft gasp ran through the audience. Even Jason paled. Vivian didn't flinch. "Ethan," she whispered, voice trembling now, "I was wrong. So terribly, unforgivably wrong. You are the only man I will ever call my husband. I don't care where you are. I don't care how far you've gone. I will find you. You promised me forever, remember?" Then, turning back to the live stream camera, she addressed the viewers directly. "If anyone watching this knows where Ethan is, or has seen him, please, I'm offering a generous reward. Help me bring him home." The crowd murmured in stunned silence. And then, the giant screen behind her flickered again. Ethan's photo filled the frame. A candid shot. One only she would know was real. Then, black. The stream cut out. Beneath the stage, Margaret stood stone-faced, lips pressed into a tight line as she hung up the call. She was the one who had ordered the live stream to be cut. Looking up at the woman on stage, Vivian, eyes glassy with something between desperation and mania, Margaret felt nothing but bitter disappointment. The moment the circus ended, Jason was forcibly dragged away by security. Vivian, still radiant with adrenaline, was ushered into a black car, her friends fussing around her. "Why did you have to pull a stunt like that?" one of them asked, not unkindly. "There are a million ways to find Ethan." This just lit Margaret's fuse. Vivian leaned back in the leather seat, scrolling through the flood of news articles and video reposts now populating her phone. A smile, genuine, for the first time in weeks, curled on her lips. "This is the only way to get the world's eyes on me," she murmured. "Now everyone's looking. Someone will know where Ethan is. If he comes back to me, I don't care what price I have to pay." Meanwhile, miles away, Ethan had just finished his shower. Hair damp, towel around his shoulders, he was halfway through brushing his teeth when the sharp pounding on his front door interrupted his calm. Confused, he cracked the door open. It was Liam, standing stiffly in the hallway, his usual carefree look replaced by visible concern. "Ethan," he said gravely, "you're trending on Twitter." He handed Ethan his phone. Ethan froze, toothbrush still in hand, as he scrolled through the headlines. His photo. Vivian's wedding disaster. Speculation threads. Conspiracy theories. Hashtags that mixed his name with hers. He exhaled slowly, shoulders sagging. "Yeah," he muttered, setting the phone down. "It's me. She's my ex. After we broke up, I left the country. Didn't think she'd pull something like this." Liam blinked. "Wait, you broke up? Then what the hell was that on the live stream? That's insane." Ethan rubbed at his temples. "It is," he admitted. "But I'm overseas. She can't leave the country right now, so it's not like she can actually find me." Liam didn't look so sure. "Still, man, that was intense. I'd keep a low profile for a while. Someone at work is bound to recognize you eventually. Maybe throw on a hoodie or something." Ethan gave him a small, tired smile. Not at the warning, but at the rare, unguarded concern in Liam's voice. "Thanks," he said. "I'll be careful. It's fine. She can't leave the country anyway," Ethan said with a half-smile. But Liam still looked uneasy. After a pause, he dug into his backpack and pulled out a baseball cap. "Here," he said, holding it out. "Wear this when you go out. Covers your face a bit, and hey, UV protection." Ethan accepted the hat, amused by the gesture, and tried to lighten the mood. "Dude, chill. She's just an ex. No need to look like we're preparing for war." Liam didn't smile. "You didn't see her face in that live stream," he said, voice low. "She looked unstable. Like, really unstable. You know how many stories I've read about ex-girlfriends going off the rails? People do all kinds of crazy stuff when love turns to hate. Ethan chuckled softly and shook his head. Vivian's done a lot of things that hurt me. But she's not dangerous. At least, I don't think she'd ever hurt me. He said it with a smile, but Liam hadn't forgotten how silent Ethan had gone just a few nights ago when they'd first talked about his past. That silence had spoken louder than anything else. Liam hesitated, searching for the right words, anything that might help. Finally, he said. Hey, you're out of it now. You're already moving forward. Just keep going, all right? He straightened up and added, a little awkwardly. And you've got us. If she shows up and starts acting crazy, I've got a ton of friends. We'll all help keep you safe. Ethan looked at him, surprised by the fierce sincerity in Liam's eyes. Something in his chest, tight and coiled for days, began to loosen. He let out a laugh. Thanks, he said quietly. Really? He had survived worse. He was in a different country now, surrounded by people who had his back. What more was there to be afraid of? Public opinion on the internet had taken a sharp turn. More and more posts began romanticizing Vivian's obsession with Ethan, painting her as a tragic heroine, a woman consumed by love. Some netizens even went so far as to curse Ethan, accusing him of being cold-hearted and ungrateful. That was until Sherry, Vivian's former friend and current target, finally cracked. Under the pressure of mounting debts and on the brink of bankruptcy from Vivian's relentless attacks, Sherry snapped and took to social media with a fury of exposés. Ethan was a great boyfriend, she wrote. When Vivian lost her eyesight for her ex, it was Ethan who stayed by her side. He was the one who helped her out of that darkness, literally. And he waited for her to see again. And when she finally did? Her mother suddenly decided Ethan wasn't good enough. But Vivian stood by him. They were happy. For a while. Then Julian, the ex, came back. All it took were a few crocodile tears, and Vivian married him behind Ethan's back. Yeah. Married. While Julian was sabotaging Ethan left and right, our so-called deeply devoted Vivian? She defended Julian. Tore Ethan apart. Is it any wonder Ethan disappeared without a word? I hope you all get to experience true love like Vivian's. Enjoy. Vivian's carefully constructed public image shattered overnight. Even with the Archer family's PR machine spinning at full force, they couldn't contain the wildfire of screenshots, reposts, and bitter commentary. Worse, Vivian had been this close to finally hearing news of Ethan's whereabouts. But once the people trying to help her saw the truth, they blocked her. Some cursed her first. She snapped. Vivian turned her full fury on Sherry. What was once friendship became all-out war. And Sherry, already in debt, finally lost everything. That's when Sherry made her final move. One day, as Vivian drove out from her estate, a beat-up car came roaring out of nowhere. Sherry was behind the wheel. She slammed the accelerator, ramming her junker head-on into Vivian's luxury SUV. The front of Sherry's car crumpled like paper. Vivian survived, barely, thanks to the high-end safety tech in her vehicle. But her body was a wreck. Her internal organs were failing. And worst of all, her eyes were gone. The damage was irreversible. She would never see again. When Vivian woke up, everything was black. Not the kind of darkness you could blink away, or hope would fade. It was total. A void. She tried to sit up, but her body felt like mist, weightless, weak, disconnected. "What's going on?" she croaked. What happened to me?" The room was quiet. Cold. Unforgiving. Terror swelled in her chest, choking her as she clawed at the bedsheets. She called out, over and over. "Ethan? Ethan? Please." No answer. Only the bored voice of a bodyguard at the door. "Quit screaming. Mrs. Archer said you're alive, That's all that matters. Her voice cracked. What does that mean? Before the man could respond, footsteps echoed through the hallway. Then a voice, smooth, familiar, mocking. Julian. You're blind now, Vivian. Permanently. And you know what that means in our world, don't you? Your mother pulled me out from under that lunatic who almost killed me. She told me to stay by your side now. He leaned closer, voice like poison in her ear. After all, you are still her daughter. She couldn't see his face. All Vivian could do was feel the sound of his slow, measured steps on the tiled floor, the weight of his presence as he came closer. Then came the hand, his fingers curling tight around her chin. The pressure was sharp. Brutal. Exactly like the way she'd once gripped his face when the truth came crashing down. Vivian, Julian whispered. Isn't this poetic? Garbage like us? We belong in hell. Together. Vivian didn't answer. A guttural sound escaped her throat, half gasp, half groan, from the pain, from the despair, from the spiraling recognition that this was her life now. Chapter 22, Melbourne Christmases and a New Life. Ethan spent the next 2 Christmases in Australia. Both years, he was invited to celebrate with Liam's family. Liam made sure he was never alone, dragging him into family games, Christmas dinners, silly traditions. Over time, they grew closer. Their personalities aligned, their values synced. They weren't just roommates anymore. They were brothers in everything but blood. When Liam graduated, the entire Summers family made their move permanent, shifting all their businesses to Melbourne. They were staying for good. And Liam, half teasing, half serious, kept pestering Ethan. You ever think of settling here too? Ethan had thought about it. A lot. Back in his home country, his remaining friends had all married, started families, disappeared into domestic routines. His parents were gone. He owned nothing there, no property, no business, no ties. Here, though. Here he was building something. Work was going well. He was thriving. He'd even saved enough to consider buying his own place, completely self-funded. There was a moment, a passing thought, when he considered sending back the money Margaret had once given him. But Liam had stopped him before the idea could take root. Are you insane? Liam had snapped, smacking his shoulder. You took care of a blind woman for years. Gave up your life. That money was the least she owed you. Don't you dare. Ethan had let the matter drop. He began preparing for permanent residency. Liam's family helped him every step of the way, introductions, paperwork, references, moral support. With their backing and his own determination, things moved fast. He declined a promotion from his former employer and took a risk instead, starting his own studio. At first, it was just him. But little by little, his studio grew, client by client, project by project. 2 years in, it was flourishing. For years after he first stepped off the plane, Ethan finally met the requirements for immigration. His application for permanent residency was approved. He was no longer a visitor. He was home. Back in his home country to finalize immigration paperwork, Ethan made time to meet with old friends, faces he hadn't seen in years. Time had etched lines into all of them. Gone were the carefree days of youth, replaced by softer voices, slower laughs, and the quiet weight of adulthood. But once gathered, the years peeled away, and that familiar rhythm returned, as if no one had ever left. Naturally, conversation turned to Ethan's love life. He didn't shy away. I was in a relationship a couple of years ago, he said with an easy smile. It didn't work out, different personalities. We still work together sometimes. My current girlfriend's name is Alice. We started dating earlier this year. She's 2 years younger than me, still at the University of Melbourne, but you'd never guess it. She's mature, grounded, and kind. As he spoke, his entire face lit up. He scrolled through his phone, showing photos and videos, snapshots of domestic bliss, laughter, late-night takeout, beach walks. The two of them looked effortlessly in sync. His friends smiled, relieved and genuinely happy for him. Then, as the conversation lulled, someone dropped a quiet bomb. "Hey, did you guys hear? Vivian's not doing so well. Might be near the end." The words hit like a soft slap. Ethan blinked, stunned. His head lifted instinctively. He hadn't followed domestic news in years, too busy building a life, building himself. And Liam, loyal to the core, had likely known but never spoken a word, not wanting to stir old wounds. He'd mentioned the past to Alice in passing, nothing detailed. To him, those memories were hazy, like an old photograph left out in the sun, yellowed, faded, barely recognizable. Vivian. That name. It had once meant the world. Now it sounded like something from another lifetime. He had assumed, perhaps naively, that she'd moved on, healed, carved out a new path for herself. Apparently not. The room went quiet, everyone subtly watching Ethan's face for a reaction. He didn't cry. Didn't look angry. Just, surprised. And that was enough to put them at ease. Someone finally spoke. "I heard bits and pieces. But I remembered you saying you didn't want to know, so I never brought it up. Figured it was just one of those chapters best left closed." Another added, with a dry laugh. "What chapter? She dug her own grave. Treated you like trash for Julian, then went off the rails. Heard she went completely insane. Got hit by a car. Total organ failure. Fully blind now. Can't walk. Margaret, for some reason, made Julian her caretaker. From what I heard, she's alive, but barely. Being kept alive by spite. Julian." It had been so long since Ethan had heard that name, he'd forgotten it. The man who had, indirectly or not, shattered so much of his life. Now, both he and Vivian were shells of who they used to be. And yet, he didn't feel triumph. Just a quiet, detached sorrow. But it passed quickly. A low buzz pulled him back. His phone vibrated in his pocket. "Liam. When are you coming home? Mom made your favorite jam. I'm saving you 2 jars. Ethan smiled. "I'll be on the flight tomorrow." As he ended the call, he glanced out the window. The sunlight streamed in, bright, steady, unchanging. Just like the morning he'd left, years ago. And this time, he was going home.